Welcome to the Backseat Thriver podcast. I'm Christina Johnston.
And I'm Bridget Kostas.
And we really think you guys should listen because we think we're pretty funny.
We are pretty funny.
Yeah.
We're unfiltered. It's real. It's sometimes what you need to hear.
Sometimes what you don't.
But tune in.
Tune in. That was good.
That works.
Welcome to Backseat Thriver.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great week. And
I'm having a great week. It's Friday.
You are. It is Friday.
I know.
And we're gearing up for a fun weekend.
We are. Happy early Mother's Day.
Happy early Mother's Day. Well, I mean, hopefully it's going to be fun, as long as someone did something for you.
My husband already has it all planned out.
He does?
Yes.
I reminded my husband a few days ago, like, oh, Sunday's Mother's Day. And he gave me that look like,
you're not my mom. Why am I doing shit?
He gave me that look like, wait, does that mean I'm supposed to do something?
Yeah, that means you take the kids out and you help them buy the gifts for me.
That's right. Get it.
And you schedule some stuff for me, maybe a pedicure, manicure, massage.
Oh,
yeah,
all right. I'm going to have to check in on your husband and see what he's got planned.
I know. I'm excited.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I've been looking forward to today's podcast some time now. As you know, we've been talking about this for a while.
We have.
So today is going to be, we've got a little bit of a wild podcast. So it's going to be a little controversial, a little emotional, a little, a little wild card. We'll just,
we didn't have any, we didn't have a box of tissue. So today I got a roll of tissue because it could get emotional.
It could. I mean, I really want to see you cry. So
I'm gonna ugly cry because Tina's like, I watch your show.
Tina wants the ugly cry. Tina, this is for you. I will make sure she cries.
You're so mean.
I know. All right. So Shay, we're gonna get ready to introduce our guest this morning. So today's guest. Guys, this is a really good one. So we've got Mike Brown with us today. He is the founder of Never Use Alone, which is a groundbreaking harm reduction organization dedicated to saving lives by providing 24/7 support to people who use drugs alone. So drawing from personal experience and a deep commitment to public health and safety, Mike launched the service to combat the rising overdose crisis by ensuring that no one has to face a potentially fatal situation without help. So under his leadership, Never Use Alone has become a vital lifeline for thousands, offering anonymous, non-judgmental support and emergency response coordination across the United States for people who are using drugs. And so, Mike, thank you so much for being with us today. We are really excited to jump into all of this and learn a little bit more about you, learn Never Use Alone, and how all of this came to be. And we've got a lot of questions for you because when Bridget and I were going through all of this, we're both like, man, it is really controversial. And I know that you've definitely been on, heard both sides of it from, is this line really just enabling drug addicts to continue to use, or is this really changing the way that we look at harm prevention and addiction? So again, thank you for joining us today. And we're really excited to talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mike is outside, so we've got some birds chirping in the background. So it's making me feel like I'm sitting outside with you and we're just in nature. So
you hear the squeaking. It's actually not squeaking. It's some really happy birds in the background. So Mike,
or possibly a cat sitting here.
Possibly a cat.
Tell us a little about yourself, Mike.
Like I said, my name is Mike Brown. I live in southern Middle Tennessee. I'm a former IV drug user. I started into opiates in 2001 and ended up using IV drug use until, it was 2021 when I quit.
Wow.
I tried a little bit of everything to try and quit, and nothing really worked for me. Ended up being cannabis was what helped me get off of shooting heroin and meth and everything. I don't smoke anymore, but I credit that a lot with my recovery. Having been a former IV drug user, I grew up in a little up south of Pittsburgh. So we started losing friends, 95, 96, something like that. Uh, but I've lost count of the number of people I've lost to the overdose epidemic. So I started into recovery advocacy in 2017. And I don't know if any of you have much insight into the treatment industry, but it's a pretty um, dangerous industry to be in. Um, After seeing behind that dark curtain for about a year or so, I decided I didn't want anything to do with that, and went into more of a harm reduction role. That's when I started Never Use Alone. Um, there's really not a whole lot to tell about me. For a living, I work as I do traffic control, but when I'm not at work, I'm running Never Use Alone. That's I say for a living I do traffic control, but for purpose I do Never Use Alone.
Ooh, I like that.
So, Mike, tell us, for some of our listeners that might not be used to that, the phrase harm reduction, what does that mean?
Mhm. For me, in my line of work, it's obviously keeping people from contracting HIV, Hep C by doing syringe exchange, keeping people alive by distributing Narcan. But there's harm reductions all over: seatbelts, helmets, parachutes. Those are all harm reduction. Um, but it's a non-judgmental acceptance of people, no matter where they're at.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there's so many different like a bartender could be considered a harm reductionist when they cut you off when you've had too much to drink. A bar itself is a safe consumption site. So people it seems to only have a people only seem to have a problem with harm reduction when it comes to drug use for some reason.
Hmm.
That's so
Well,
true.
and that's, that so getting into really what is Never Use Alone. So it is a national hotline that users can call. And the idea is that they've got a safe person on the other end of the phone call. And should something go wrong, if the person becomes non-responsive after using, the person on the other line is going to reach out to EMS and they'll dispatch somebody to help that person in need. And so the idea of it is pretty. I mean, it's when Mike, exactly what you just said, that a bar is a safe consumption site, and we know that alcohol is deadly. It is terrible for you. There's all the research, yet it's so socially accepted. And so when you start looking at drug users, the stigma around drug users is, they're poor, they're uneducated, they're disgusting. Like, you can think of all of the nasty words that are associated with drug addicts, when really you look at an alcoholic, and how is an alcoholic different from a drug addict? It's just it's a different drug, yet again, alcoholics don't get the same stigma that a drug user gets. And it's fascinating when you start talking about seatbelts and helmets and all of the things. Bridget was saying this morning that, how is an Uber for a drunk person any different than a hotline for a drug addict? So it's just really
Exactly.
interesting. It's really interesting, the way that the lens that we see addiction and users in, and how different they can be,
Yeah.
depending what's your drug of choice.
Right. Yeah. Somehow society has managed to separate. I mean, you hear it all the time when you're referring to people going to treatment, you refer to it as drug and alcohol treatment. They're no different,
Mhm.
but somehow we see them as different because a drug's legality seems to determine its morality for some reason, and I don't get that.
Oh, that's
Um, the dare classes we teach kids, and when they're young kids,
5th
we're
grade.
teaching them very young to hate drug users and to look down on them. And I think to change the stigma around drug use, we have to start there and stop that.
So what do you think is the right approach?
I don't think there really is a one right approach. I mean, there are as many pathways out of addiction as there are in. So we just need to be more accepting of the small victories. Dan Big coined the phrase "any positive change is recovery," and whether that be somebody, accepting them, whether they're trying to use less, or if they're still using but they're going to therapy now, or they're still using but they're trying to be safer by using a syringe exchange program or calling Never Use Alone to ensure their safety. Um, I think we need to be more accepting of the small victories, and I think if we did encourage those small victories and celebrate them, we'd go to a lot less funerals.
I
But
was
there really is not one way to get us out of this, I don't think.
Mike, I was looking at the Never Use Alone Instagram site, and one of the posts that you guys had on there is it's time to replace punishment with harm reduction and judgment with understanding. And
Hmm.
that really that really hit home with me. And
Hmm.
and it did. It like if I look, and this is from a family member that's been impacted by addiction. I'm gonna ugly cry to you
Get
here.
the toilet paper.
It's looking at the website, looking at the Instagram site, it kind of, I don't know, like a part of me felt a little, my heart says, it's the right thing to do. My brain says, this is absolutely the right thing to do, but in like so many different perspectives of being impacted negatively by it, it's
Hmm.
like at first I felt like I was condoning. Like, oh, I'm condoning. But then when I listened to the episode, and it really changed my perspective, and listening to listening to the nurse and listening to the caller and listening to
And
EMS.
Bridget, you're referring to when you say the episode. So NPR did
NPR did,
a national story
yeah.
on This American Life. It's called The Call. If you haven't heard of that, if you haven't checked that, you've
It
got to listen to that episode. So that's
it
what Bridget's
really,
talking about.
yeah, it really hit home. And at the end of it all, coming back that, you guys, you save lives every single day with this. And it enabled that chance. It allowed that, that the user on the other end of the line, that family member, that sister, that brother, that mother, that father, to go full circle with that opportunity that they may not have had if they didn't call that line. And that really hit home to me.
Yeah, outside of the life saving aspect of our service, we have a rule that we never push recovery in any way. We never suggest to the caller that maybe you shouldn't use, or maybe you should use a different way, or a different substance, or any of that, or maybe you should go to treatment. We never bring that up unless they ask about information on getting help. But if they do ask, we'll go to the end of the earth to help them. We've got a resource file that I've been building for 7 or 8 years now, but it's a resource file for people that are uninsured or state insured, uh, that gives them places they can go in every state in the U.S. So if they ask about getting help, we'll go to the end of the earth to help them. But if we feel like if we were to be preaching at them about maybe you should quit, wouldn't your life be so much better if you quit? They wouldn't call back the second time. I
Yeah.
mean, they may call the first time, but outside of the life saving aspect, something I just didn't anticipate when starting this is how deep the connection would be between operator and caller. Um, they're able to, the callers, well, and also our operators, are able to speak to people who've been there and understand it in a non judgmental way to where they don't have to put on a mask for a probation officer or a therapist or a 12-step meeting. They can just talk openly. And some of the best conversations I've ever had were with our callers. Drug users are awesome people. I have a theory that people who, heartless people who don't care don't become substance use disorder. They don't develop problems with drugs because they simply don't have any reason to self medicate. but people with big hearts, people who who suffered trauma, um, they are the ones that are more likely to end up developing a substance use disorder because they're self medicating. But
Mhm.
pardon the word, but assholes don't care about anybody else. So they're less likely to. I'm not saying that people who don't use drugs are assholes. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying people that use
That's fine.
drugs,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean they're people who people with big hearts are more likely to develop a problem with those drugs from self-medicating. You know, we've got our mental health system is pretty much non-existent now. And we wonder why more and more people are using drugs. I mean,
Yeah.
mankind has used drugs in one form or another since the beginning of time. That's never going to change. And it's just different drugs we're using now.
Yeah.
People are self medicating for whatever condition they have. But yeah,
I
outside the life saving aspect, the conversations we have helped a lot of people to find their way out of that.
yeah. Well, and and I've always said whether or not this is actually true, but if I've knock on wood, I feel so fortunate that I've not had massive trauma in my life. I've not lost a child, but I've always said, if something happened to my kid, like you could go find me under a bridge and I probably would be the biggest drug addict in the world, and it's just when you're in that situation, when your viewpoint is like, well, everything's great. How could drug users are just like, gross people, things like, no, so many of them were just like you until something huge happened and something, and wait until you're in that situation and find out how do you cope with that and what changes. So I'm curious, a little bit when we're talking about some stats about your line. So you Never Use Alone has had 60,000 calls to date, and you guys have had 230 EMS activations. So 230 EMS responses, and of that, 175 confirmed safe. So when you do the subtraction there, obviously the glaring number is okay, so 235 EMS dispatch calls and 175 confirmed safe. So there's that ugly truth in there that 55 people didn't survive even though they used.
No, no, that's not to say that the other 20, usually it's about 75% of the time we can confirm that the caller was safe.
Okay.
Well, that's not to say that the other 25 died. It's just that sometimes we don't know the outcome.
Okay.
Um, Usually, when we call EMS, usually we'll have two phones. The operator will have one phone talking to the caller, and then they'll use another phone to call EMS.
Okay.
So once they're on the phone with EMS, they're still on, and they can hear what's going on in the background with the caller. So then they're able to hear when EMS arrives, and they can hear when the caller starts responding again, or something like that. So we're able to find out that the caller survived just by listening to what goes on in the background. Or sometimes they call back and say, thanks for sending help, I'm fine, But 25% of the time, usually about 25%, we just don't know what happened. So that's not to say that the others died. It's just that we don't know.
Oh, okay. That's still, I mean, that's an incredible 60,000 phone calls. And I mean, that's really impressive. So one of the stats that we know of that in 2022, fentanyl killed 200 people a day in our country, which is just absolutely wild. And of that, 92% were accidental overdoses. And so I think that speaks volumes to what this line is doing. Um, and again, it is kind of hard to wrap your head around where it feels like, are we enabling people to use drugs, giving them a safe place to do that? And I think again, it's just because there's such a stigma. You wouldn't say that. Like, are bars just enabling alcoholics?
Absolutely.
Should we shut down bars because it's a safe place for alcoholics to drink?
Or when you give out free helmets, or
Yeah.
when you're giving out, safety child seats,
Mhm.
or when your bartender's calling an Uber for you. when
Exactly.
you're using gloves, to protect yourself from, bodily fluids, things
Mhm.
along those lines in the medical profession. And that was really, I as I learned more about this, as I learned more about this line, I just kept going back to, when and no pun intended, the enabling, are we enabling the, are we enabling drug users? And that was my initial gut response when I heard about this. And then the more I dove into it, I just kept coming back. You're enabling chance. You're enabling that
Exactly.
next chance, that second opportunity, that chance that that person may not have had for sobriety, for life, for to see their family one more time, to visit their child. You're
Yeah.
enabling that by being on the other end of the line. And
Yeah.
that was really impactful for me because
Mhm.
if and I was hesitant to call my family member that, that has battled with addiction and was an IV user. And I was like, "Oh, I really want to talk about this." But it's like, does that, to talk about it, does that bring back feelings? Does that I don't know. I felt a little like it's not my place. Like I don't want to ask the question, did you call this line? Have you ever called this line?
Mhm.
Did this help you in your sobriety? Did you know that this was even a thing? And then there's a part of me that, a lot of times you hear in the world of addiction that relapse is part of your recovery. You know, you
Mhm.
that is part of your journey. You will relapse and if you if you want recovery, you'll do it again. And, depending on your addiction and your where you're at in your stage of life,
Mhm.
that can happen. And that's part of your recovery. And, how many people out there know, the longer you stay away from drugs, the odds of you having an overdose when you get back in it are very high,
Yeah.
because your body's clean and because you got it from a distributor that you didn't know and because it's been years or months, is there fentanyl and does that increase your chances? So knowing,
Yeah.
knowing that this line is out there for everyone, regardless of where you're at in your journey, it's it's
Yeah.
it's enabling.
But after a period of abstinence for after 72 hours, a person has zero tolerance again. So it's like they never used before. So you were talking about how people having relapses after a period of abstinence. Like for me, for example, I quit shooting fentanyl in I guess it was April of 21. But then 4 or 5 months later, I decided to use just a little bit, and I mean it was a tiny little speck. And the last thing I remember was getting up to put my rig in the dispenser thing, and next thing I remembered, I was on the floor being woke up by a friend's wife, Narcan me. They
Wow.
found me blue dead on the floor, but just a little speck, and that was like a hint of what I used to use. So yeah, it's after just 72 hours, a person has zero tolerance. And going back to the enabling idea, I mean, um, when when somebody calls for says, "Hey, can you come get me? I'm too drunk to drive." There, people are praising them for making the right decision.
Yeah.
If somebody says, "Hey, I left to go pick up a friend last night because they were too drunk to drive,"
Oh.
they're praised as being saviors and so and so. But then when somebody says, "Well, I called Never Use Alone and was trying to be safe," they're like, "Oh, you drug addict, you this, you that." The stigma around it is just ridiculous. But it's no different than somebody calling for a safe ride home, or
Yeah.
let's say a lady's walking to her car late at night, calls a friend to make sure that she gets to her car okay. Same thing. It's just a different situation.
It's so fascinating when you put it like that, and I think such a difficult piece of this is particularly in our community, seen a massive increase in drug use, and I think, the fentanyl obviously is a huge problem nationwide, but it's so in your face now, and I think, you've got the people who've used who the term the fent fold, and you see it looks like zombies walking around all over town because everyone is all of them are so high on this, and it's so
Hmm.
addictive. Well, we know that fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin. And so Mike, I have a really blunt question for you. Are you surprised that you're alive?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
shouldn't be.
it's yeah, it's and that last time I overdosed was there's a thing called doing the buddy system. I was with a friend, but he had used and then nodded out, and I used right after him, and then I went out. It killed me, but he was nodded out, asleep basically. So when he woke up, I was blue on the floor, no idea how long I'd been there.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, I got very, very lucky, and that was just 4 or 5 months after my kid's mother died. So my kids would have to bury me 5 months after they buried their mother.
Did
So I got
she
lucky.
did she pass from drugs?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I was. She was actually. I was on the phone with her when it happened, and
Yeah.
I just couldn't get help to her quick enough.
So, how did you get involved in drugs, and then how did you get clean? What was the moment where you said enough?
My ticket in when I was 6 years old, I got shot in the face. I have a glass eye now, and so it was rough growing up. When I found alcohol and weed at first, that was it allowed me to live free of all that anxiety and all the torture.
Mhm.
I just didn't care. So I was self medicating, as most people are, self medicating for those issues, and it just progresses. Uh, I was 24 the first time I ever took a pill. I always thought I was allergic to opiates, so I never messed with it. But I had a real bad toothache one night, and I took a couple of hydrocodone for that toothache. And at the time, my son was missing. He was he was with his mother, but they had taken off somewhere. That's a long story, but it wasn't anything that I did. But she was in hiding, basically, and I didn't know where they were. But so I took those couple of hydrocodone for a toothache, and not only does those things take away the physical pain, they take away the mental pain as well. It's like I've heard it referred to as uh, opiates are like when you're driving down the highway and it's raining real hard and everything's loud on the car and it's just chaos, and then you go under a bridge and everything's quiet for a second. That is opiates. It's very true. It just not only does it help the physical pain, but it works wonders on emotional pain until it doesn't.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and so that's how I got into it. How I got out, I did the 12-step thing for years and years and years. It never really was for me. I'm not a religious person, so that kind of put a wedge in the plan there between that program and myself. Uh, I've tried meditation, I've tried medications, I've tried everything I could think to try, and nothing really worked for me. As far as the 12-step thing goes, I would I would smoke a joint or drink a beer or something and say, "Well, you lost it all. You got to start all over." So I'd end up with a needle in my arm. I mean, hell, if I just start all over anyway,
Oh,
so I'd end up with a needle in my arm, nearly dying of an overdose. And so in 2017, 18, something like that. I don't keep track of the days. I never thought I'd make it this far anyway, so I don't keep track of when it all happened. But so in 2017 or something, I decided, this 12-step thing just isn't working for me. I just it's not working, so I'm going to try something else. So somebody recommended, why don't you just smoke a joint and relax? So I did, and then pretty soon I realized that I hadn't really thought about putting a needle in my arm for a few months. And then a year went by, and it that wasn't the last time I used drugs. I mean, I went back and forth for a while, but I credit cannabis and Suboxone with helping me stop using. And but I think the biggest push for my recovery, or the biggest tool in my recovery, was finding a sense of purpose. I never had a purpose before NUA. I never had any kind of purpose. I just my purpose was getting high, trying to escape.
Mhm.
Um, but finding a sense of purpose and something to be proud of was the biggest motivator to my continued recovery. Um, so once I left the program, I found that cannabis really worked for me. It's not for everybody, I'm not saying everybody go smoke a joint or whatever. Um, like I said earlier, there are as many ways into addiction as there are out. So cannabis is going to work for some won't. But after realizing that I was doing well on that, it occurred to me that all those years I spent in those rooms, white knuckling my way through it and going back to using when they told me I'd start it all over. In the end, cannabis is what saved me. So the 12-step program delayed my recovery in a way. Had I never gone to one of those meetings, I may never have gotten as bad as I did. So when they say people, oh, he just doesn't want it bad enough or whatever, they push them into a 12-step meeting, and then when it doesn't work, they blame it on them.
Mhm.
It's just not for everybody. I mean, 92 to 95% of the time, it doesn't work for people. And but we've been conditioned to believe that if it doesn't work, it's their fault. They just didn't try hard enough, or they just didn't want it bad enough, or that sort of thing. Um, but nothing, absolutely nothing, is one size fits all.
Mhm.
It's not going to work for everybody. So, but yeah, I credit cannabis and Suboxone with my recovery. I no longer use either of those. I quit the Suboxone last year, and I still smoke every now and then, rarely, but it really screws with my anxiety now, so that doesn't work as well. It affects me negatively now than rather than positively. So,
So you
but yeah, that's how I got in and how I got out.
you might even say that, I mean, it sounds like you're saying the never use alone line is also what saved you. I mean, giving you that purpose, um,
Hmm.
to give back into.
Yeah. Yeah, people ask, how can I've tried everything. What can I do to get out of this? I always tell them, find a sense of purpose. Go outside, walk around, and just look at things. If you see something that makes you smile, jump into that. If you see a dog walking down the road, volunteer for an animal shelter. If you see a sign for a veterans organization and it makes you happy or makes you feel good, go get involved in that. Work with a volunteer or work with a veterans organization. If helping people who are unhoused makes you feel good about yourself or gives you some of that serotonin and dopamine, do that. Go volunteer with a shelter or something. Um, but I tell everybody that purpose is the number one thing that will help them to get out. I mean, connection, I believe, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And I believe positive connection is the way out. Positive connection and purpose. So I recommend everybody get involved with something that gives you purpose, and that'll help a lot.
I
I can't say it's the answer, but it
Yeah.
helps.
I love that you said run to what makes you happy. So, Glennon Doyle, she's got an incredible podcast. When she was talking about purpose, and it was interesting because in that moment, I think I was also like, "What is my purpose? What am I doing?" And she said, "Find the thing that breaks your heart and run to it. And that's your purpose." And so it's kind of the same in that same
Yeah.
vein of what makes you smile and go get that and find what breaks your heart and go help in area too. So I think you've probably used a little bit of both, the amount of people that you've lost in your life and a lot of what you've lost for yourself during those years of addiction and finding that purpose. So you talk about volunteering. So you've got a pretty robust team for Never Use Alone. Are they all volunteers? How are you funded? How do you get the work done?
Um, all of our operators and all of our staff were all volunteer. Now, we just recently started a program where we call it Operation Unhoused Operator. And we always struggle with having volunteer coverage in the middle of the night, the overnight, like third shift type thing. So we started a program where we pay unhoused people that are experiencing homelessness, to take calls in the middle of the night. And so 90 something percent of our operators are all volunteer, but we pay homeless folks in the night to help us out. Um, but yeah, they're all volunteer. Everybody has either firsthand lived experience, or they have a child that lost a child, or they have a child who's still struggling. We have therapists. We have active drug users. Abstinence isn't a requirement for volunteering with us. So we do have active drug users who take or operators, and that's proven to help them a lot too. The operator themselves finding the purpose. There again, the purpose. We've had a lot of them who came to us as current drug users. Now we have a rule that if they've used, they can't take a call for half hour or whatever it is, just to make sure they're okay. Obviously we can't have the operator nodding out on the caller.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but finding that having something to purpose, something that they can be proud of, has allowed a lot of them to either reduce or even quit using altogether. I've got many people on my friends list on Facebook who were former operators or callers who are now doing well, going to school, have great jobs, having babies, and living life. And so yeah, it's but yeah, as far as funding goes, we're strictly donation based. We don't receive any grant funding from the federal government or state government or any of that. Our operating costs are very low. It doesn't cost much to do this at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really need a whole lot of funding. Which with all this fund APLA grant stuff going on now with the government taking all that away, I'm glad we don't depend on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are a lot of other organizations right now that are struggling really bad that may go away because they they've built their organization on this funding stream that they were promised, and now it's gone. So there a lot of them are having to shut down. So I'm glad we don't depend on any of that.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, Bridget's got some burning questions. And so, Mike, hang with us for just a minute. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to be back to hear more about Never Use Alone.
Sure.
On Backseat Thriver, we dive into the messy, meaningful moments of life, especially parenting and mental health, because raising kids today takes more than love. It takes support, insight, and sometimes a little help. That's where LNC Therapy makes a difference. A compassionate mental health private practice proudly serving the Tucson community. They specialize in supporting children, teens, and young adults through challenges like depression, anxiety, ADHD, anger management, grief, and more. With a team of experienced, heart-forward therapists, LNC Therapy offers personalized care that meets your family where they are, whether that's in person or via telehealth. Because every young mind deserves a safe space to grow. LNC Therapy, supporting Tucson families one session at a time. Visit them at 7493 North Oracle Road, Suite 135. Or reach out and visit them on their website at hello@lndtherapy.com. Now accepting new clients.
This clean, low-carb protein powder by Long Life Protein proves that less is more when it comes to nutrition. We've packed 24 grams of protein and only 3 grams of carbs into one serving of vanilla cream. Our non-GMO ingredient list is simple. Just whey protein concentrate and isolate, our digestive enzyme blend, and natural stevia. The protein builds lean muscle mass, while those enzymes ensure optimal nutrient absorption. Explore our other guilt-free protein flavors to fuel your gains. Add a scoop to water or milk when you're on the go, or mix it with yogurt for a satisfying late-night treat when cravings hit. With long-life protein powders for men and women, you get pure protein without artificial flavors, colors, sweeteners, or fillers.
All right, we are back. So, Mike, the way that I found you was through the NPR episode of This American Life, The Call. And
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about how that came to be, because I think for a lot of people who are avid podcasters, This American Life is the highest bar that you can get. And so what an honor to be featured on there. Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Well, the story was the call. The episode was about a call we had where the person had called and then became unresponsive. So our operator called EMS for that person in their area. The EMT that responded was also an operator of ours. I mean, what the coincidence, what the chances?
Yeah.
Um, so we were able to connect her with the help she needed, and she's doing great now. But yeah, it was just a strange coincidence that she called, and then while well, as I mentioned earlier, we stay on the phone. We can hear what's going on in the background. Well, the EMT could hear the operator on the phone trying to yell to get his attention, and he picked up the phone and ended up being one of our operators. So the EMT was the operator. So it was just a strange coincidence, and I'm not really sure how they heard about that incident. I know the EMT did like a video advertisement type thing, and did an interview with that caller also. So they may have heard him that way, but I'm really not sure how they heard about that.
Pretty crazy. Did things kind of blow up for you after that episode in a good way? I mean, did people start reaching out on how can they
Yeah,
help or getting involved?
yeah, we got a lot of applications. As I mentioned earlier, all of our operators are volunteers, so we rely on people applying to be volunteers. And when that episode came out, we had thousands of people applying to help out. And of course, donations started coming in a pretty good bit. But we had been in operation 3.5 years, 4 years when that happened, and I believe it was a year and a half ago or something that the episode came out. So yeah, it helped our exposure a lot. Put the word out about us, and I think people were able to hear how it all works, and they were able to see that we're not cops. We're not going to push people into treatment. When they call, it's confidential. They were able to hear the inside of it all, to see how it all works, and trust is a huge thing with our caller base. I mean, when I started this, I honestly didn't think it would work. I didn't think anybody would trust us enough to call.
Mhm.
Then the COVID lockdowns happened 4 or 5 months after we started, and then the phone started ringing. When people were locked in their houses, and
Mhm.
so that's when our phones started ringing. But trust is the key for our callers. Without that trust, they'd never call. So being able to see how it all works and hear a call and that sort of thing, helped a lot in building that trust.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have when we think of like crisis centers, rehab facilities, you know, as people go through their their sobriety journey, are like what's the impact there? Are are these crisis centers, rehab facilities, do they share these lines with, with people who have just recently gone through the program? Like, is this
Yeah,
widely used?
yeah,
Is it adopted?
absolutely. Uh, we have a lot of calls from people who say that they got our number from their therapist or from their recovery coach, or that sort of thing. Just about every harm reduction organization, most treatment centers, um, have our flyers on the wall or hand out our business cards with their overdose reversal kits. Um, now, I say most treatment centers, that may be a stretch. Obviously, most treatment centers are basically just 12-step boot camps, and they they're afraid that they're afraid to. I don't know why that is. I mean, as you said, relapse is part of recovery. They know that the chances are highly likely that somebody's going to end up using again, but I think they're afraid to promote it because like you said, a lot of people think this is enabling or encouraging drug use. Um, but yeah, so most I've heard people get our number from their attorneys, their sheriff's department, it's everywhere. Anywhere that might have something to do with mental health or substance use disorder, usually they have our business card or a flyer somewhere.
Wow. Okay, Bridget, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second because I think that, you having personal experience and having Mike on the line with us, when you and I were talking about this, and I think it could be easy to have the knee jerk reaction of like, what we've been saying, like, oh, this is so enabling. And is this the right thing to do? And then you shared a little bit about family experience living with addicts. And if you didn't have the addicts in your life, do you think that your knee jerk would be different, that you would be more compassionate about this? And having lived with, having
I
addicts
do.
in your family, I think, it certainly makes you more jaded. So,
I
w-
no, I that that's a really that is a really loaded question, and I definitely feel that in my and maybe it's me, maybe I'm harder than most people, and it's not, it's not judgment. I'm not placing judgment as much as that I am the protection and the frustration and the anger of how it impacted, the children in my family, myself, my mother, you know, um, I am much more jaded to the sense of I am not as compassionate as I would be if it has not been my family. I feel that in my particular case, if if one of my siblings had ever used, never used, you know, one of my siblings is going on, 3 to 4 years of sobriety. The other one is, a couple years of sobriety, on and off, and if they had, ever used, never used alone, and it's helped them, then I'm glad that it's here, and I'm
mhm,
glad that they had the choice because that it enabled the chance. It
mhm,
enabled the chance to see the child. It enabled the chance for sobriety. It enabled the chance to reconnect, that I have the relationship with them that I do. But I honestly feel that if I had never been impacted the way I have been by drug abuse, my father was an addict, I have siblings that, that struggle with addiction. And I feel that if I hadn't been impacted the way I have been, I would be much more compassionate. I would be like, I would I would probably be somebody on the other line,
mhm.
wanting to reach out. So saying all of that, this is a sibling, this is a father, right? Now, if this happened to one of my kids, and if one of my kids, got into addiction, that'd be a different story.
Yeah, right. You would,
Would my compassion level go through the roof? Would I be, like these mothers, going down the street trying to get a glimpse of my child? Probably.
yeah.
You know,
You
it would
definitely would.
it would change me.
Yeah.
I think everybody's interaction with addiction, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex addiction, whatever the addiction is, there's a downstream impact. But I think at the end of the day, to me, what I have heard, and when I see this type of organization, it's enabling. It is that circle opportunity for living, and that it's not enabling. It's just
Yeah.
it's gonna
Mike, I'm curious, you having been an addict, how you're now sober, what is your hope for drug users? And while that sounds sort of like a weird question, the I appreciate the empathy and compassion you have, but I think that you also have the knowledge that you don't wish this type of life on somebody because it is very hard. And obviously, the root problems of addiction are heartbreaking. What do you hope for the future of this organization?
On the surface, I understand that this is going to sound absolutely insane to a lot of people, but I think all drugs should be legalized, and regulated.
Hmm.
Uh, the reason we lose so many people to fentanyl is because there's no way to accurately measure a dose. So they don't know how much they're taking. If somebody could, let's say somebody who's already a fentanyl user, and I'm not saying that we should be able to just be here, come on in and try some fentanyl, not
Right.
that. But somebody should be able to know what's in their substance. Safe supply is hugely important to getting ourselves out of this. With the street supply now, you don't know what's in it. Nothing. I mean, we've got new substances coming out now. Xylazine is one. There's a new one that's in the same class of xylazine, but it's called metatomidine. Xylazine is a animal tranquilizer for like elephants and stuff. Uh, but metatomidine is like, I forget how many times more powerful than that. But then outside of just the drugs, like when I was using fentanyl in Michigan, I later found out that they were cutting it with some sort of plant food. Um, there's this stuff. There's some kind of stuff they're buying on Wish or something that looks like ice, that they're cutting into the ice supply now, and it's just horrible for your body. But I think if people were able to know what they're using and how much, that would help tremendously. And if not stopping completely, definitely reducing overdose deaths.
Mm.
Um, I think also opening up access to medications such as Suboxone, methadone, that sort of thing. Making it easier to get would help a lot. And, there's a lot of stigma around that too. People are of the opinion that you're just trading one thing for another.
Mhm.
But addiction is, according to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, addiction is defined, or recovery is defined as a process of change through which an individual improves their health and wellness, uh, strives to reach their full potential, and lives a self-directed life. Now, there are tons of ways to do that, but people don't understand that there's a huge difference between physical dependence and addiction. If somebody's on Suboxone and they are, yes, no doubt, they're physically dependent on it. But if the only negative consequence they're facing is the stigma that and the judgment from people because they're on it, that's not addiction. That's physical dependence. Um, so I think we need to increase access to those things, and stop so much regulation on methadone. I mean, people call it liquid handcuffs because you have to go to the clinic every morning at 6 o'clock. I mean, it gets in the way of jobs. It gets in the way of life. Um, and Methadone is prescribed to people for pain. And when it's prescribed for pain with people with no history of drug use, they're able to get a prescription just like any other medication, take it home, and take it as needed. But
Mhm.
when it's prescribed to somebody for a treatment of opioid use disorder. Then they have to go to the clinic every morning at 6. They have to submit their drug tests 2, 3, 4 times a week, whatever it is. Um, we make people jump through so many hoops to get the medications they need to improve their health and wellness. So if we legalized and regulated, at very least decriminalized all drugs, stop arresting people for what they have in their pocket, um, and start realizing that recovery is about more than the content of your urine. Um, if you're, you know, there's no way to be technically, there's no way to be completely abstinent from all mood and mind altering substances. So we need to stop with all. I mean, there are so many things that I hope for in the future. I hope we stop pushing people into 12-step meetings and then blaming them when it doesn't work. I hope we at very least decriminalize all drugs, if not legalize and regulate all drugs. I mean, other countries have done it and they're seeing huge success. Um, I hope we increase access to mental health care. I hope we reduce the barriers to medications to treat opioid use disorder and other disorders as well. Um, and you hear the argument a lot of, well, if Narcan's breathing, why isn't insulin or EpiPens? And I totally agree. All of us do. Um, I hope our country stops being bought and paid for by big pharma, and man,
Ain't
that's a
that
whole other podcast there.
right?
Right?
Well, Mike, we knew it was going to happen. This hour absolutely flew by. Tell our listeners if they're interested in getting involved, if they're interested in donating, what's the best way for them to do that?
On our website at neverusealone.com, we have some links to donate, and there's also a link on our volunteer page. There's a little application form to fill out if you'd like to volunteer to be an operator. There's an FAQ page there with most of our more commonly asked questions, so that you can get more information about us and understand us a little better. There's a resources page with graphics that you can download and print, business cards, flyers, that sort of thing. If you do outreach of some sort, you can download our business cards, print them on regular printer paper, and put them in with your homeless kits or whatever. Um,
Well,
but yeah,
that's
there's we're always looking for more help.
amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. This has been a really impactful episode for me. And I think at the end of the day, if there's anything that I hope our listeners can take away from this episode is you're not enabling the addiction, you're enabling chance.
Absolutely,
Well said.
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Well, Mike, we are glad that you made it through, and congratulations on getting to this place and finding your purpose and helping save lives. It's really, I hope that we have changed some minds a little bit. I know certainly for me, I am guilty of the stigma when you just see so much of this. And I hope that we all remember that these are people who, many of them just like us. And one traumatic event, one wrong decision, one not even knowing decision. It's so dangerous these days, exactly as you're saying, with drugs not being tested and who knows what is going into them. So I really hope that we all take a moment to think about this. And with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, we just really appreciate your time and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
All right, we'll talk soon. Thanks, Mike.
Bye bye.
All right, listeners, we will be back next week. Bridget, any closing thoughts for us?
No, none. I think full circle on this one is opportunity. Opportunity and just, I hope that you can take a little different perspective on addiction And, you know, whether that's drugs, whether that's alcohol, whether that's gambling, whatever it may be.
You have a porn addiction, right?
Yeah, no, you do.
Oh, shoot. Okay,
We
that's
got that
mine.
on our
Got
last
it. Okay,
podcast.
got it.
Hello, come on. No, I definitely feel that at the end of the day, you know, we hope that this has given you a different perspective on enabling, you know, and it's in this case, you know, there are so many addicts that have used the never use alone line that have had that second chance.
Yeah.
That have, you know, that are,
Amen.
you know, that are on the other side now.
Yeah.
So, you know, if anything, that if you know somebody out there, if you're, you know, driving by a crisis center, or rehab center, or your therapist, maybe your therapist that you're seeing, maybe they didn't know that this line existed. You know, share it.
Yeah.
You know, share it with your community, and you'll find some more information about this site on our Instagram page at backseat.thriver. And as always, you can find us on backseatthriver.com. And just thank you for listening to this one. This was a tough one.
This was heavy.
This was heavy.
Hopefully next week will be a little bit lighter. All right. So tune in. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.